Hi, this is Isa Nakazawa, your host for Transmission Studio, a show featuring the independent artists and community-based organizations that make San Francisco's arts and culture scene what it is today. We're super excited to be bringing you this three-part conversation with three local heavy-hitter Bay Area journalists. Today, we're really excited to be joined by Carlos Cabrera-Lomelí. Carlos is a community reporter with KQED's digital engagement team. He also reports and co-produces for KQED's bilingual news hub, KQED in Español. He grew up right here in San Francisco's Mission District and has previously worked with Univision, 48 Hills and REFORMA in Mexico City. We are super excited to be joined by Carlos today. Stay tuned. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I want to dive in. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at KQED? I know that you're a community reporter, and I want to know a little bit about what goes into that. Like, what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm part of the Audience News Desk, which is this initiative by KQED to really understand what our audiences need, their information needs. And not just our current audiences, but also the audiences that we haven't served, that we aren't serving right now. We are public media, which means that we have to serve the public. But we know that institutions like NPR, KQED, historically have only served one certain sector of the public. And that can't be, right? So we have to be very strategic on how we branch out. And that's where my team comes in. And specifically, my role is understanding how specific, historically underrepresented, underinformed communities, what their information needs are, and how they're consuming information. So it's not just enough to tell a story on KQED FM 88.5. It's, for example, if I'm telling a story for immigrant Spanish-speaking communities, I'm like, okay, where are they getting their information? Is it through their WhatsApp group chat? Is it through their Facebook groups? And that's where we're actually going to create the story for that. So it's, we've done a great job of telling stories of people from marginalized backgrounds, but now our goal is to tell stories for these communities.
Absolutely. Shout out WhatsApp
right?
for the immigrants.
Exactly.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp, WeChat, like everything. Yeah, that's what we think about every day. And we talk to the aunties, the cousins, the tios, being and that's part of the job, is just being what sets me apart from my other colleagues is that, they get a story, they go after it. But for me is I spend a lot of days, interviewing people, being like, okay, if you want to understand, how to, apply for food stamps or how to find affordable housing in California, where are you going to go? Who are you going to talk to? And once we better understand those links of how people, because they don't go to KQ.org, they don't go to the NewYorkTimes.com, whatever. They go to the Facebook group chats, or they go down to the food bank and they talk to people there. And that's exactly where we want to be.
That's really moving that's your role. And that I really agree that, we're in a time where there's a lot of buzzwords around equity, and there's a lot of emphasis, like you're saying, on the storytelling. And I think less emphasis at times on audience development and what it actually looks like to connect people to stories, instead of just being the subject of stories. What does it actually mean to move people into being participants and not assuming that people are like you said, logging onto these websites. And so thank you for the work that you do. And can you tell me a little bit about, you kind of just did, but what is your approach? What's your research approach, and then how do you work as a team in your team at KQED? How do you choose the stories that get prioritized?
So we have several tools. So we have more more shiny tools, for example, Google search trends, where, Google makes publicly available what people are searching, not just in the country, but you can also specify within regions. So you can actually see what people in the Bay Area are looking for, let's say relating to Medicaid or to affordable housing, right? So we can just be okay, what are the related searches? And it's people are going to be looking how do you apply for affordable housing, or where is affordable housing in the Bay Area? And we're able to understand how people are thinking about these things, because it's, we want to be specific. And when people Google up, the questions they have, we have to kind of work with the algorithm that Google has, right? We want to be at the top and be able to give the information that people are looking for. So we have to kind of work with that technology. And it's also, but besides being at the, in front of the computer and doing this research, it's also being like out in the field a lot. And that requires like going to like town halls, that requires going to food banks, that also just like going to people's workplaces. Earlier this summer, we did a lot of reporting on workplace conditions and retaliation for farm workers in Sonoma County.
I saw that.
Yeah, so it was a lot of going to just like plazas up in Healdsburg, in Santa Rosa, supermarkets. I covered the San Jose mayoral election last year, and it was going to like the several little placitas, little plazas, and throughout San Jose East Side, also South Side, and just like, I mean, obviously a lot of people are like not interested in talking to you, but just being like, hey, I mean, we made it clear this reporting isn't, to be on a story. It's really for us to understand what are people asking, what are people trying to figure out, and what are people confused about, because that's also what we really want to figure out. What is the misinformation that's being spread around, right? On the group chats, on the Facebook groups. And that also helps to understand what people want to know about, right? Because misinformation represents a lack of information. And we then bring all this data, all this insight back to my team, and we're like, okay, because obviously we can't cover all the stories. We wish we did.
Yep.
But we then have to be strategic and decide, okay, what do we have time for? What do we have the resources for? But additionally, what, let's say it's a deadline's coming. Let's say for FAFSA, right? Which is the form that high school seniors and also current college students have to complete to get financial aid, right? Let's say the deadline is coming in a month. That for us, it's like, hey, this is coming in a month. Maybe this other story, that's going to be in 6 months. Let's get this right priority. Or it's also community we really want to work with, right? For a long time, we've always, we really want to grow out of, I think KQED for like sometimes really focuses on SF and in the East Bay. But, we cover 9 counties. So let's talk Santa Rosa, let's talk Solano, let's talk Napa, let's talk Santa Clara, right? Deep Santa Clara, right? Gilroy, Watsonville. Yeah, right? Past San Jose. Yeah. And if it's like, hey, if it's something that we can then build, then let's go for it, right?
I love that. I'm like inspired right now. Yeah, it's interesting. I had some questions. I was talking to Nastia earlier about legacy journalism's kind of fixation on I would say the myth, but that's editorializing of objectivity. But in your role, it's interesting, right? Because you need to have trust within the community, because I could imagine being a community member, and if you're asking me a question, I might feel worried about being exposed, or I might be, there might be high stakes for me to even reveal my identity. So totally. Can you speak a little bit about like the difference of like needing to have space and professional distance in covering stories, but then for your work, maybe you do need to have some sort of intimacy and familiarity with your community members to gain their trust. Yeah.
And then earlier in my, when I started working in journalism, I was at a different publication where I was pushing for these types of stories, right? Where they're not just stories, they're more like guides, where they're like, okay, we're talking about a story about deportation, but what if your family's, or someone in your family's facing deportation? What can you do? How, what are the resources? And this editor pushed back against that thinking, because they're like, if we are offering this to people, you were kind of taking a side. And to me, that, like, I cannot illustrate how...
We'll zoom in on our face.
Yeah, like, I mean, and, now it's been a while now, but in that moment, I'm not an angry person. I very, very rarely get frustrated, but that was definitely one moment where I was like, I didn't have words, right?
Yeah.
And because to me, it's like exactly like what Nastia said, like objectivity for journalism, it's something that, like, for you to say that you're very removed from a situation or from a story, whatever, that in itself is an incredible privilege.
Yeah.
That then, it really plays into the worst sides of journalism, I think, because it's like, hey, I come from this completely separate place. I'm going to take exactly what I want, and then when I'm done with it, goodbye.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it can't be, right? And I think that's what really makes me excited about audience journalism, because I see it as a circle. It shouldn't be just like, okay, source, newsroom, right? Where it's like the source is just giving everything to the newsroom, right? Their stories, their trauma, their struggles, right? It should be also like, we got to close that loop and be like, what is the newsroom providing for community, right? It's like, yes, like powerful stories, content, but also like at the end of the day, especially when times are tough, when there's inflation, people are trying to figure out how they're going to pay the rent, like how they're going to get their kids through school, like finding childcare, like affordable COVID care. So I think that's what, to me, is I gets me why I'm so excited about audience journalism, because I see it as a way, as an alternative to the path that journalism has taken for a while, right? And obviously journalism is this huge field, but this idea of like we got to be separated and independent and cold and impartial, right? Like, it's not taking a side, but it is acknowledging the debt we have with community.
Right. It's almost like refusing the framework of sides altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you're creating, that was like a really powerful way to describe it, of like what is a more honest diagram or ecosystem that is actually acknowledging explicitly the power that flows.
Totally. And that doesn't exempt us from like holding community accountable, from holding ourselves accountable. Like that, I think that's like the worry. Like if let's say, we're like this awesome resource is being offered, let's get people out there, but then let's say, hey, whether that resource wasn't so awesome, whether it actually put people in unsafe conditions, or where it actually was exploited by people who, that resource wasn't meant to benefit, then we're also going to talk about that too, right? I think, so I don't think that having, like putting ourselves in the service of community removes us from the value of journalism, which is to hold people accountable.
That was beautifully said. And I think if anything, when you shift people into like actual complex roles instead of these fixed roles, more accountability comes into play.
Exactly.
It's like the extractive model actually is more dangerous, because then we all are like frozen in these roles of these fixed roles that aren't really honest. So I think the work that you're doing is really exciting. And taking a little pause from the work-specific questions, you grew up in San Francisco in the Mission, right?
Yeah. Actually, a block and a half away from where KQED is right now.
Oh, wow. By the bus depot?
Yeah, yes. It was actually, oh my God, where, I don't know if you're familiar, but where like ADC, American Theater Company, used to be like right across the street from me. And now that has become its own housing development. But right across the street from me, and I would actually walk by KQED every day going to middle school, and KQED used to look very different, the building, from what it does now. It was a warehouse, and I was like, what is this warehouse? It didn't even say KQED. It just as an 11-year-old, I just would see it as this like bland, not very cute building.
Right.
And I'd be like, I can't look at it. But now I'm in there every day.
I love that, like the kind of echoes and moments in our life that come back.
Yeah.
There's right now just such a big doom loop narrative in San Francisco that's being broadcasted around the world, but it is also being internalized by people who are working and living here. What's your take on that? And from your perspective, actually like living and growing up here, like how would you characterize the moment that we're in San Francisco?
Yeah. So this question gets me really excited because we're actually working on a Doom Loop series, which is so many ideas, and I'm just okay. So let me backtrack. Okay, so I'll talk about this little series and answer your question at the same time. So this idea of the Doom Loop, speaking as strictly as someone who grew up here in the city, it feels like it is something that came from, not even from the city, that it came from another place. It came from like an editorial room, an editorial meeting in Fox News, or like whatever, like tech boardroom or a real estate company that was upset where the progressive decisions that the city has taken and the community has taken. And this term came about to be like, to kind of punish those decisions, right? To be like, hey, you took these policies, now look what's happening to you, right? And the fact that it came from that it really feels that it came from outside the city, and that it is a term that's being hammered and hammered again, not by San Franciscans, and by San Franciscans I mean people who moved here, who love the city or who were born here, right? It's a really wide category, but who just have this care and appreciation for the city, and who know it and have seen it change. It's frustrating, and that's why we've actually started a series to really give back the mic to San Franciscans, to really Bay Area, because I think now the term is now being applied to the whole Bay Area.
Right.
So, I mean, like, what does the Bay Area mean to you? It's home to you. What does it mean to you? And it's more than doom loop. What do you think people get wrong about this? So I'm really excited about that. And if you have any thoughts about the doom loop or like how that term makes you feel, what you think people get wrong about it, you can share your thoughts. Yes, you can share your thoughts on our story about this at kqed.org/explainers.
Amazing. Yeah, I just like asking people from their own personal perspective, because I think for me, I'm having a hard time holding the duality of seeing this city go through a moment of like deep crisis, but understanding that it's very much not decontextualized. And
Totally.
I really want to hear more people talk about this, like what I believe is a very real analysis of feeling like there's a punishment that's being articulated very implicitly around what progressives were fighting for.
Totally. And also at the same time, like you said, like we can't ignore the reality that living in the Bay is tough. It's expensive. It's if your car hasn't broken into, or you've experienced, some sort of violence, or lost your home. Yeah. That's
very real.
That's very real. And I don't want to be the person being like, no, being in the Bay is awesome, and like all like rainbows and unicorns. No, it's nuanced, and it's love. It's a little bit of it's mixed feelings.
Yeah.
But we gotta honor those mixed feelings, and we gotta honor the people who have made this place what it is.
And it's your job to bring us that understanding of power, and not just keep it like in this place of generality that I think it is, or this place of doom loop narrative, which isn't really complex.
Yeah, and we got to question that term, where it came from and who it serves.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Yes.
And if there's any plugs that you have for how we can follow up with your work.
Yeah, I think so. You can go to kqed.org explainers, or if you want to follow some of our bilingual work, because a lot of our work is also in Spanish as well, you can follow us on Instagram, KQED en Español.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Yes,
I really look forward personally to following your work.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. Love this energy and love this conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Transmission Studio, and keep it locked for the next episode coming in a few Thursdays.